Right. A few tech issues. Apologies. I would like to say I kind of hacked the system and tried to change the registry and do some really cool techie stuff on my laptop. But I just switched it on and off again. And that seemed to work. Thank you very much, everyone who I think is here. We've got Lawrence watching. Thank you. Charlotte, Pedro, Judith, Becky, Nina, and Jamie. Really appreciate you being here. As always, with these webinars or this show, or what do we call it? Is it
It's
show?
a show. It's a show.
Yeah,
It's
show.
like a performance.
It's a performance. We are the monkeys here to perform for you. But if you have any questions that you're coming today with, please share them with us in the comments or directly in the Ask a Question feature down below on your Crowdcast app or browser window. It will be really just make sure that we're talking to people who want to know who to give you the information you need, rather than us just trying to rabbit on about stuff that really you're not interested in. Though I'm assuming, Charlotte can't hear us for some reason.
What? That's not a good radio show.
Well, actually, that will help. Everyone else, can everyone not hear us? So Lawrence must have been able to hear us. He said, yeah, he can hear okay. Charlotte, I'm not sure what might be going on there. Apologies if it's an internet connection thing or a local tech issue. This is going to be... I'm talking to her. She's gone... That's ridiculous. I'm going to chat. I think show is too grandiose given the amateur approach we have to this thing.
It's like that's the beauty of radio in the internet age. It's basically everyone has their place. You can be amateur. It's about intent, I think.
Any Muppet with a voice has their place online. Oh, okay. Yes, switch it off and on again, Charlotte. That's the way to do it. It works every single time. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Today, on our weekly Waking Up to Money show, we're going to be talking about a topic that we kind of touched on last week, and it's something that we believe is quite a challenge for most people. When you got basically you're trying to put a price on something that you know is very, very valuable, and of course we'll maybe talk about what that means in terms of very, very valuable, and how then you get the right price that people will then buy, and you don't feel poor and they don't feel like they've been ripped off. So there's that that kind of conversation or that topic that we want to cover here, and from my experience, a lot of the time it's people in the kind of more service-based businesses, unless you're selling a Rolex or a new Breitling or something. But I can assume most of our listeners and community are in the service-based type of business, and they'll have some real quite impactful offering or what they consider a very important offering, and we're trying to see, all right, how do I kick off the pricing aspect of this? So that's where we're starting from. Ben, is there anything else, the story behind why we want to tackle this that's coming up for you?
So no, in terms of sort of story behind you, I think as you mentioned, sort of bubbled up in conversation a little bit last week, and then in dialogue, in chat with some of the people who've been coming, it kind of felt like it was something which it was a kind of problem that sort of lots of people kind of were wrestling with or kind of wrestled with at different times. And so it kind of felt like a useful thing, going back to what you were saying, trying to be useful rather than just noisy in the making of these. And I think, whilst it probably is, it is more appropriate to, or more relevant to services. Of course, the nature of the service can vary, because the thing that actually was coming to mind as you were just talking there, whilst lots of people who are following this, listening, contributing, they might be coaches, they might be sort of providing marketing services or some, that kind of service. The thing that came up for me as you were talking, I'm a trustee of a charity, and I know we were kind of looking at how they were kind of eliciting donations. And actually, a lot of what I was trying to get them to kind of think about, and this may be a bit of a tangent, we'll come back in a minute, but the thing I was trying to get them to think about is thinking of the donation as a service too, because they were sort of stuck in the mindset of being, the kind of charity mindset that somehow the donor is doing them the favor, and that, the power all exists on the part of the donor. So it's like, it's everything, please, will you kind of help us? And the thing that I was just trying to get them to sort of shift around is to remember that actually, in the act of donating, in the act of giving, the charity is also providing a service. They're providing a service which talks to basically gives the donor a whole load of benefits, a whole load of reasons for wanting to donate the money, which is partly about the work that the charity is doing, but it's also about there's social benefits, there's emotional benefits, there's all sorts of personal things that a donor gets in return when they donate money to a charity. I was trying to get the charity to kind of start thinking about these things via that lens, because it kind of opens up the possibility that actually maybe the donor wants to donate extremely large amounts of money because of the transaction, because of how they value that. And as soon as you get it out of the lens of you asking for money and you start to think about it via the lens of all of the things that the person enjoys through buying your service, it starts to kind of open up the possibility that the value of that service is much, much higher. And something that you kind of sort of said at the beginning, you're saying we were kind of interested in doing this where the value of it is high. And I guess one thing I'd kind of add to that is actually in many cases, people don't appreciate the value of what they're doing, whether they're coaching, whether they're whatever the kind of nature of the product or the service that you provide. In many, many cases, and this kind of goes back to actually a little bit what we were talking about on one of the early sessions around kind of money stories. But I think that the kind of our sort of starting principle, our starting premise here is undoubtedly, given the nature of the people in your community and the nature of the people on this call, undoubtedly, the work that you do is worth a lot more than you think, actually, in many instances. Your work is much more valuable than you think. And so I guess our sort of starting premise, I was saying, is to go with that mindset a little bit, to engage with your customers, with your market via the lens of the work that I'm doing is valuable, it's useful, and it's providing a lot of value to the person who is enjoying it.
So I was strangely enough, I was on a Clubhouse call yesterday. And there was a lady there who does, I think, kind of digital marketing. And she was talking about actually during this time where businesses are struggling, she's having to think about her prices again. And she's got a price in her mind, but she doesn't know if that's the right price. And so she's thinking of lowering it because she says there are people out there who can't afford it. And so she's worried about how to, what price to use. And so that sprang to mind because of your thing about, it's high value, but you don't necessarily know what price to put out there. And she was in that space of like, oh, this feels like guesswork, no, not even that. It wasn't even that guesswork. It's like, oh, I got this price, but I think it's too much.
Yeah, so she's doing that classic thing that we've spoken about, I think, most weeks, which is she's negotiating with herself. She's successfully negotiating herself down before she's gone to to her customers, to the market with it. And I think one of the things that we're kind of really interested in how people bring a bit more of that kind of fluidity, a bit more ease to how they're thinking about what they're doing, how they're engaging with their customers, their clients. And, when it gets to the money bit is really where a lot of us then trip up, because we kind of put those blocks in place. And one of the things that, like I say, if we're kind of aiming for people to have more ease around it, is to embrace the idea a little bit of experimentation. So I guess starting premise, you are worth more than you think, and everybody has a little bit of a propensity to negotiate themselves down before they begin because they think that that is somehow easier and more palatable. So kind of recognizing that and parking that a little bit. So going with a bit more confidence and then experimenting, exploring it with various different people to see how they engage. And then also to remember with that there are really important things like anchoring. So the first price that you say, the first figure that you offer the clients or customers who you're testing it out with is the reference point that they use to decide whether what you're talking about is good value or not. And I guess the only other thing, which just in sort of specific reference to the example you were providing there, it might be that what you're doing, the people you're speaking to can't afford that thing at that rate. And so then the question is, well, is there a different thing that those people can afford, providing you know that you've really explored it with them? Is there a different thing that those people can afford? And also, then there are other people, many other people, 7 billion other people, from which there will be a big pool of people who really can afford that and more than. So it's about kind of exploring the different options with different people and using the right kind of techniques so that you are making it easier for people to understand the value of what you're providing.
Brilliant. I just put a poll out for those listening just to get a feel for who's in the room. So the first question is, are you in the process of launching a new high value offering? So is this something that's alive for you at the moment? And if so, are you worried about pricing too high? It's a bit of a leading question there. I thought at least something easy for people to get their head around. And then if that sparks any specific questions in you now, then please feel free to put that into the chat. So I put that second question about pricing too high. Maybe tackling that, because you said something, we are worth more than we think, but we're scared to put the price too high. Don't know how that fits in with what we want to talk about here. Oh, actually, there are some points we wanted to cover in a more structured way. So just wanted to put that in there as an option, or take us along the journey, Ben.
Okay, so the the kind of your first question to me is to either explore the worried about pricing too high point and worth more than you think.
Yeah.
Well, I think the kind of worry about pricing too high is going back to this thing around, this is not too often we get stuck in our own little feedback loop about what something is worth, what the value of what we're doing is. And of course, that's kind of pointless and also sort of unnecessary, because we are not the judge. We do not decide what the value of what we do. That is for our customers and clients. And so the more time we spend negotiating with ourselves, it's to no useful end, because that time we could spend trying to understand via the perspective of our customer and client what our work is worth to them, because that's the only important measure, is what is it worth to them. They decide what something is worth. We don't decide. We're just negotiating with ourselves. So I think trying to kind of work on the idea that actually what we do is more valuable than we think. And if you have a propensity to negotiate with yourself, then you kind of know you are kind of talking yourself down in that respect. And the thing that we just always encourage people to do is explore it with your clients and customers. Try and understand it via their lens, because only they are the only ones who can decide what something is worth. And they're the ones who we need to be in dialogue with.
I'd be curious to hear if anyone out there is listening, if you're listening, if you could describe maybe the product or service that you're looking to launch, maybe around the things that you want to create, or the outcome you want to create for people, because it will maybe help us guide this conversation, because I'm wondering whether it'd be interesting to step through just that process of launching something new. That first thought, like, "Ooh, I'd really love to help these people with this. I got this idea of how I could do that. It's going to take a lot of time and effort and energy, and so I want to be paid appropriately. I've got a price in mind I think I'd like to go for, but I don't know if that's really a realistic starting point. What do I do first?
So shall I just kind of sort of tackle that? And if somebody has got a kind of something specific that they can give us any more kind of feeling for, that would be useful. And, as we've done with other weeks, if there's somebody who is wrestling with something and they are kind of brave enough to step into the bear pit of the live radio show, very happy for them to join us on screen, and we can have a bit of a chat about anything specific. But the sequence that you just described, Carlos, so you're thinking about launching something new, of course you want to sort of share in the value of that. You've got an idea about what that might cost, but you don't really know what to do next. Yeah, that's the sort of sequence that you were sort of imagining. Mm-hmm. So, I think the thing that we've been talking about is this thing around sort of experiments. You might have an idea about what it costs. I guess the first thing we'd want to know is, what is that idea based on? Because whilst it could be, it's likely to be quite arbitrary, isn't it? You might have a kind of an idea of the kind of minimum amounts that you need to earn from doing something like this. And I think that's a kind of common sort of premise that people come into these things, a kind of common lens that people come into these things with. And the kind of challenge with that, of course, is there's a sort of concept that we talk about a lot, this idea of kind of anchoring. And so the first figure that you kind of offer to other people, the first number that you say to other people, becomes the kind of level that they compare everything else against. So if you were talking to your customer or client about a project that might cost £100, but then the thing that you offer them costs £20, they're making a very favorable comparison because their brain has heard £100. Then you're talking to them about something which is £20, and that feels kind of very favorable. But of course, the same things happens in reverse to ourselves. If we think that actually I need to earn £5 from doing this because that's what I need, or just for whatever reason, then we are anchored to that as well. So our brain has decided that it has to be £5. But of course, the issue with that is maybe it's worth £25 to your customer or your client. And if we're not exploring these things with them, we have no way of knowing. So I guess the first thing that I'd say is, if you have a figure in mind, on what basis have you decided that is the figure? Because you might very well find that you are anchoring yourselves down. So yeah, it comes back to experimentation again.
So a situation that I see often is that there's a real focus on what I do. So I'm going to give you this download, or you have this many lessons, or this many hours, or it's over this period of time. And then it's like, okay, does that sound valuable? Does that volume of stuff sound valuable? And then the immediate thing is like, okay, I'm going to write it all down and I'm going to show it to someone. I'm going to say, how much is that worth? And please agree with me or not if this is an experience that you've had when thinking about trying to price something, particularly something quite high value and important.
Because I think the mistake that we make a lot is, which you're sort of articulating there, is that somehow the value of what we do is linked to the amount of stuff that we do. And so if we're trying to kind of launch something which, we feel is a new high value product or service, we fall into the trap of thinking the amount of stuff that I produce, the amount of stuff that I offer, is the really important thing. Like, the more it is, like, I know from when I was running my last company in a sort of more agency thing, there's that classic sort of waste of time that loads of agencies do, which is they justify a high fee, or they think they're justifying a high fee, by producing a really big report at the end, which of course nobody ever reads. But it's the same idea that you're talking about there, that somehow if it's worth a lot, it's because there is a lot. And of course, that is just not true at all. It's just not true at all. It's not about how much of something. It's about how useful is something. And this is about exploring with the people who you want to provide your product or service with in advance of deciding what the right components are, exploring with them the kind of the outcomes that they want, the change that they want to buy, because that's the thing which determines how valuable something is, whether it's a course, a product, service, whatever it might be. It's what is the value of the change that the customer wants to buy, because we buy everything because we want something to change. And we need to understand what the value of that change is before we can really usefully put a price to something.
And so there's a set of assumptions that we're making at some point about what that might be. And for example, when we were a web design agency, we would sell the idea of, it'd be great if you had your own content management system, because then you could update the site whenever you wanted. And we think that's going to be really useful for you because that's what you want to change. And so we were making this assumption that the change that people wanted was control over their content. Now, I'm not saying that's a good assumption or a wrong assumption, but there's something there about making an assumption and tying a value to that assumption and then pricing directly based on that assumption and not necessarily knowing whether that's the value. Mm-hmm. Do you see where I'm going with this?
Yeah, absolutely. There's one of the things that we sort of talk about a lot that, which is a sort of quote I stolen from somebody else, which is that basically customers are really only buying two things. They're buying good feelings and solutions. And so in your case, it might be that, it's the outcome that people want, the change that people want in the example of your agency is, yes, people did want the ability to change their website. They like the idea of that, and they might want that as an outcome. The solution that they want might be a changing website. Whether they are the ones who author the change or not might not be the way that they want to get to that sort of solution. But the change they want, the solution they want, is the ability to kind of, to look and feel live and changing and dynamic and sort of updated and all of those sorts of things. They want, the good feeling and the solution is all about that, how they feel about themselves, how they look to their customers and all those sorts of perceptions. Now, that's what they want. But the assumption, which is we're going to kind of create this, which allows you to do that, that's probably not the solution they want, because they just want all those things to happen. But they don't want to have to do that because nobody ever fucking does that. So it's kind of interesting there.
I like actually you going on to that, because one of the things that happened when we were a web design agency, there's a number of agencies shifted into search engine optimization and internet marketing. And they made a killing, such a killing. And so when I think about, and I love to build stuff. That's the thing. I wanted to design a new content management system, and I wanted to get into the code. And so let's sell that, because it means I can play around with code and we can design some new interesting products. But what people wanted is, like you said, the ever-changing website, because it made sure that they ranked higher on Google so that they could get more traffic and eventually make more customers. But we never sold that. We just sold, you can embolden some text and you can upload an image and it looks really nice the way you do it.
Yeah,
we didn't talk to our customers on that level.
Yeah And I think, it's a similar thing to the kind of anchoring point a little bit, but via the idea of kind of things that we do. Often we are sort of stuck in the lens of the things that we do. Like in your case, we have an ability to make these things. Therefore, these are the things that the assumption is these are the things that people want. But, again, like you say, actually what the customers wanted is they wanted to kind of look like they were ever changing, so that they were sort of constantly kind of feeling and appearing new and relevant, because they want to attract new traffic, because they want to get new customers, because they're worried about their own money, and so on and so on and so on and so on. And so the more that you're able to kind of explore this via that lens, actually the more you will be able to understand the good feelings and solutions that really they want to buy. And I know one of the things that we spoke about is that lots of people are in the sort of coaching space or the advisory space. And a lot of the skills that all of you guys have through that, the ability to ask questions, the ability to see through and around the words which your clients are kind of throwing at you, because, as we all know, there's what they say and then there's what they mean. And what we're really talking about is getting into the what they mean bit. And so using the skills that you have as coaches, as advisors, to be able to kind of sort of look behind those words helps you understand really what their motivations are, helps you really understand what the good feelings and solutions that they want to buy are. And in those places are the clues about actually what the value of your work is. And this is the kind of ground to explore before you anchor yourself down.
And I think more importantly and more relevant, it's most relevant when you're doing something high value, because I believe there's an opportunity not only for the customer to understand the value, the price when you get to it, but there's the potential to even go higher.
Yeah,
because you discover what's more that actually is even more value. So we have a question from Peaceful Creativity. I love that name. I think it's more about specific ideas. So how exactly do you explore the value with your customers? It would be helpful to hear specific questions or scenarios that have worked to have that convo, and assuming you get the numerical value. So some grounding, maybe. It sounds like to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, Peaceful Creativity, while we can't give you a silver bullet, but grounding it in some specific some case studies in a sense.
So are you willing to come have a peaceful conversation with us?
Oh, yes.
Just to get into this a little bit more. Are you willing to do that? We come peacefully, I promise.
Please type in the chat if you're up for it, and we will invite you to just share a bit more where you're coming at it from. Otherwise, myself and Ben will just make up a story. Yes, excellent.
Hooray.
Brilliant. Yes, and we can do both. Here we go. Peaceful Creativity is in the house. Let's see where, and we'll find out if his name is really Peaceful Creativity. Yeah. Oh, it's you.
Yeah, sorry.
Your photo does not look anything like you.
That's my business partner, Arnaud. And I was logged into Crowdcast as him. But Peaceful Creativity is our co-venture. So yeah.
Okay, David.
Yeah.
Do you want to share a bit more specifically, or do you actually you can either have a specific question, which it's case study based, or we can just work through a situation or a scenario that's alive for you at the moment?
Yeah, sure. Whatever. I jumped on because sounded like you wanted to. It would helpful to get more information to answer that question. So whatever you need. Yeah.
So maybe is there something that you guys are launching at the moment and you're trying out that you could give us maybe a bit more detail about that we can work with?
Yeah, we have a coaching. We're coaches. We have a coaching business called Three Spirits Coaching, and we're trying to get the pricing right, and we've priced it higher than either of us have feel comfortable. We priced it well. The more I look at the price, the more I think, yeah, it's totally worth that. Probably more, but we pick numbers that are like at the top tier of what we would expect someone to say yes to for our client base, and based on our current network and the people we know. So I guess I totally agree with the idea that value is in the eye of the beholder, and this that a lot of these numbers are arbitrary, and even for two people in the same exact life situations and financial situations, they're gonna have different numbers. So I've over the years, I've been doing this type of work, working with individuals, trying to offer services and figure out pricing. I've been doing for 8 years. I've had so many conversations with people about what would you really pay for this? What's this really the value to you? How does it compare? And I just never get information that I feel like is super useful. I've tried also lots of like pay what you wish, pay what feels good approaches, pay what is a match for you and what this delivered to you. And most of the time people hate that. They're just like, well, you just tell me what you want, and you know what I mean? And it's like putting that pressure on them doesn't seem to work either. So that's another kind of like, interesting question that I have is, have you ever seen that work? But that's maybe a second topic. I think I have seen that work in one instance, which is Charles Eisenstein's body of work that he all offers pay what you wish. And he has a whole kind of like framework for doing that. But, so anyway, how do you actually get this information? I mean, do you offer it like, here, I'll give you it for free, or this is like super low price. And then what would you really pay for this? Afterward, is that what you do? Because I've tried that before, I agree with you that outlining the whole thing and then being like, how much would you pay for that? Like, doesn't, that hasn't worked for me. So, I mean, the closest I've gotten is that scenario I just described. Like, I offer people the thing, they test it out, they try it, they experience it. And then afterward, I'm like, where does this match with other similar services you've tried? Where does this, what would you pay for this? And that I've got a little bit closer, but nothing that would give me the information for the higher tickets stuff that I'm offering now, which is like, the highest version is a 6-month program for $15,000 US. And then there's another tier of that, which is 6 months for like $5,000 US. So, I don't know how to get that information with them. I don't know how to figure out what that's worth. I know that there are a lot of other coaches who offer less and charge way more, and I know that my results can be as good or better. So, I just picked a price that was like stretched me, but was still less than like what I know is out there. So, but that didn't involve talking with the clients at all. So I'm just trying to get that information that Ben is talking about. How do I actually do that conversation in a way that's going to give me useful information for picking my price?
Great. Thank you. Can I
quick
say
answer.
Sorry.
Let's go quick answer.
Have I got a quick answer?
Take the course.
Yep, there we go. Okay, thanks everyone. See you later.
Sorry, just go.
So a couple of things in that. One, just I don't know. It was your second question, so I won't kind of dwell on it. The thing around putting it on the customer, like you tell me what this is worth. Now, it does feel, and I know Charles Eisenstein is able to sort of do that, but clearly there's many things he's able to do that we are not able to do. But I think I part own an organization which provides meditation courses. And we've tried to experiment with all of this as well. And we also tried the, pay what you worth thing, pay what you think it's worth. And, it's like you didn't say, it's incredibly difficult actually for people, because whenever we buy anything, right, there's a little voice there, which is going, is this going to work? Is this going to work? Is this going to work? Like actually at the point of transacting, there's a whole load of kind of risks that we're kind of quietly, subtly trying to kind of weigh up when we're kind of making that decision. And when the person who's providing the service also puts on us to say what it's worth, we're just creating a whole load of reasons why I'm not going to transact with you. So I just sort of reference that just because very much in agreement with what you were saying there. The kind of pay what you worth feels generous, but is actually a complication, because what we're looking for at the point of transacting, at the point of deciding, is we're looking for ease, we're looking for simplicity, and really we're looking for reassurance. This reassurance that this feeling that I have that buying your service is going to do the thing that I want it to do. And we just want reassurance. We want the kind of the noise, the worry to go away. And I think a lot of that is then about sort of control and comparison. So a question that I kind of have to you, what is it that brings your clients to you? Why is it that they're considering buying your services?
Word of mouth. Yeah.
No, what is it? What is it that they why not how do they come to you, but what is it that they're going to get through buying your coaching?
They want to. Well, it's kind of what you said earlier. They want something to change, and usually that change has to do with they're just feeling. Well, this particular offer is for successful people who have hit that, they've achieved some successes in their life, but they feel like, is this it? This feels totally hollow, shallow, feels like something's totally off and wrong. I'm not making the impact that I want. And I'm not satisfied, even though I supposedly tick the boxes. Like what's wrong here? So, we have methods that turn that around so that someone can access the real joy, peace, and love that they have inside for their life. So what they're kind of paying for is the access to that in their life, and have their life match that and look like that, so that they feel like it's the life that they want to be in. That's what they're paying for.
So one of the questions,
very often they have a more specific, like very often, I mean, that's like generally, but often they have like, there's a specific thing that comes with that. Like, they want it to focus on that feeling at work, or they want to focus on experiencing that at home. It's very rare that it's like, just a blank, my life isn't working. It's more like, I think this isn't what's working. I need help to do that. And then of course we explore much more when we're working together. But that's the general idea.
Yeah. And so I guess in that kind of initial conversation with them, whilst the kind of, like you say, the specifics kind of vary, there's something which is kind of not right, which is not working. And so then a change that they want to make. And the thing that is not right, is not working, has a cost to them. Now, that may not be, and I use that word sort of intentionally, because it may not be that they're clear at the outset that it has a financial cost, but in exploring, so there is basically dissatisfaction at work. Work is not going well. It's affecting how I am at home. I did kind of clearly making these things up a little bit, but essentially what you're sort of getting into is helping them understand and articulate essentially the things which they are not happy with. Because one of the questions that we get people to kind of experiment with, and there are a range of different questions, is like, what is the cost of not doing this?
Okay. Yeah, that's a good question. What's the cost of not doing it?
And I think once you've explored, and you will have a whole kind of armory of very good questions. But once you've sort of explored these things, I think actually you do start to get to a place where, with things like what is the cost of not doing this, where you start to kind of understand a little bit, you start to help people understand that there is a cost to not doing these things. And then I think the thing to kind of get to beyond, one of the examples that you suggested is you kind of talk about the things that you do and then say compare it to something else. I think if you start to control those comparisons a bit more, you have a bit more control over that dialogue. So questions like, what is the cost of not doing this, helps people get into the space of understanding what the cost of not doing it is. And then the task through conversation is to kind of give examples towards that. And also in using comparison. So rather than saying, if we did all of these things, what is that, what's the equivalent to that elsewhere? Depending on the types of people that you're speaking to, like say, if they are kind of sort of successful people at sort of work, you can have a feeling for other things that they might sort of spend, and other instances. And then it's about you controlling those comparisons. Because again, going back to this other thing, the more that we put it on the person we're speaking to kind of make those judgments for you, the less that they're going to do that. So it's more about how you feed them essentially through the dialogue, through the discussion, so that you can start to put figures to it that you want to. If you're aiming for something which is about 15K, then in the conversations that you're having with them, what you want to be talking about is actually kind of change that might be worth 50,000 to them. And so you're using these figures as an anchor so that the figure you are coming with feels safe in comparison. And so how you control the comparisons is an important part of what we're talking about.
Okay. So what you're saying is direct questions about what it's worth aren't useful. And what works is offering an image of a change that is actually much higher value than the service you're providing. And I guess so. And you're talking about kind of reading between the lines here, with the customer. So you're just kind of judging their reactions. Still feels a bit, vague to me. It's like, is there no way to get more direct? Does it have to kind of be this experimentation of like, okay, here's my anchor. This big life change is worth for example, 50,000, but we're going to charge 15,000 for this process, and is it only just that experimenting that is what works? Or, I mean, is there some other way to be like, I don't know, what have you spent on this kind of transformation before? I don't know. I just I feel still, it's like, just, I don't know how to do it. I wouldn't know how to do it if I was talking to someone. I just love to leave this conversation knowing, okay, here's something I could try here. I could specifically do.
So a question I have for you, David, is, or my assumption here is like, how do I speed up this sales process where it doesn't feel so open-ended?
I don't mind if
you change now to make that a bit more direct to getting to the conversion.
No, I don't mind if it takes time. I just want to get more direct to having reliable information about what I should price. I still am not sure. I'm not sure how to do that. I imagine I could have, maybe it's just it's just like a whole series of individual conversations. Is that kind of what you're saying, Ben? Where it's like constantly trying maybe different anchors, constantly trying different, trying different ways to get them to not have to think too much, but just giving them comparisons and giving them different options and seeing what's sticking and landing. Is just like, is that what you're saying? That's like the necessary process?
I'm saying that is the most effective process, because like you said earlier, when you were talking earlier, you said, you kind of quite rightly suggested that what a project is, what your work is worth, may vary to the same client on different days or different clients on the same day. I can't remember the exact example you gave, but the point is, there's no such thing as what was an equivalent transformation. What did you pay for that? What was the value of that? It's no such thing as that, because like you well know, the world is much more fluid than that. And I might be at a particular point in my life where the need for the transformation is extremely great, as compared to another point in life where the cost of transformation is different. And so the point is, what we say, if you have a kind of fluidity to that, and actually in your case, if there is an opportunity to come with a kind of open mind to those dialogues, then what you could charge can flex and can vary. And I would say to your gain. If you're trying to, if your wish is to sell a program where there isn't that need to kind of constantly renegotiate or constantly explore it, then that's again, that's a sort of slightly different thing. I would say if there is the opportunity to explore in dialogue, I think the gain for you is considerable, because what something is worth is, of course, completely different on a day-by-day basis. And the way you do that is by exploring the change that they want to make, and by controlling comparisons, and by how you manage that conversation. So there is not a single bullet which is going to sort of solve that for you. But the more that you understand the change that they're after, it is easier for you to control the comparisons.
Yeah. And I think that, okay. The picture's building. I think that it sounds like also the prices that, the prices are open, listed on the website. So that serves as an anchor, and then I'm happy to not charge full price all the time. You know what I mean? If I have this dialogue and someone's like, well, 9,000, okay, well, we would consider that, you know what I mean? And so maybe that's part of the process itself, is just, transparently putting those prices out there as serving as anchors as well. I guess one thing that might help me is I would love to hear a story, Ben, of like maybe a time that you had that conversation and it was like, a light bulb went on, just some specific example would just be maybe helpful for me to really lock this into my understanding. Okay,
so give me 2 seconds, because in a slightly unprecedented way, I need to just plug my computer power in. I'll be back in 1 second.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, Carlos, you seem so
that.
You found out it was me.
I think there's showing prices on your website, and then there's actually getting the right price because of the nature of your work. The nature of your work is so subjective in terms of the value, because it's based on the person. You're not necessarily factory processing people through a journey of transformation. That's very subjective. But when you share price, what I've learned is when you have transparent pricing, it's very defined in terms of there's a very clear package So what you sell as a one-to-one coach or an emergent process, that's very hard to just say pay this and you get this. But you can package processes. You can say, all right, this is a thing, generic, an example of how you can work with me, and this is a price that you could pay. But that shouldn't stop you from then, okay, if you want that kind of service, we need to talk to find out what is it you need, where do you need to go to? And then that becomes the opportunity, which is Ben is talking about, is exploring, maybe they're going to pay 100K, God knows. This is the thing that I think Ben's really trying to push, is that not to be limited by a number that's already in your head.
Yeah. We do have a process. It's one of the reasons we're charging more than we have in the past, is because we have an actual methodology that we offer, and there's 3 parts to it, and we're pretty specific about those three parts and how you interact with those 3 parts depending on what package you buy from us. So that has helped us feel more confident in offering higher numbers. But yeah, I'd still love to hear like a story about that just gave a light bulb moment.
And so the kind of the light bulb moment being what my understanding about what's happening around kind of pricing and kind of approaches into it. Is that what the story you're after?
Yeah, a story where you've used this process, in one of your ventures, or a specific, one of your clients specifically used this process. What was the actual conversation like, and what were their anchors that they used, and what was the information they got that was like that light bulb that like, oh, I could be pricing more, or I could be pricing, or it's not a match. I would just love to hear an example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, there's a few examples I can give sort of from my own experience of kind of running my own businesses, which was really where a lot of what I've kind of sort of have been sort of teaching since is based on my own experience. And so the kind of commercial context is a little bit different. Some of those examples, it's more selling to other businesses, but the kind of process is kind of broadly similar. So there was an example of a client of ours. They were a kind of big American technology company. We had a kind of ongoing relationship with them. We sort of spent a lot of time with them, so really understood what their kind of motivations for things were. We understood, what the sort of context was to a lot of their business. We knew that they had a kind of big problem where they were trying to launch a new product in China. It was trying to be managed from their headquarter building, their sort of headquarters team in California. So we knew that there were basically all of these kind of problems that were going on, which were linked to the relationship that the chief executive had with the team who was responsible for managing it in California, the relationship that they had with the team in Beijing, and there were all of these kind of parts that were not moving. We also knew that the product that they had been developing, they had spent hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars developing, and they were basically kind of run to this kind of problem. And so they needed to launch the product. The product needed to launch on a certain date, but they were in this kind of impasse situation. And so somebody needed to kind of help them unblock this situation. And so we knew from kind of all the dialogue that we were having with them what the cost of the block was, because they were racing towards this launch. They were not able to kind of affect the launch because the teams were not kind of working together in Beijing and in California. They were getting a lot of pressure from the chief executive. And so they basically, having invested hundreds of millions of dollars on this launch, were running into the situation where they could not deliver on what the chief executive was asking them to do. So the kind of cost to the team who was responsible for doing it was kind of very high, because they were getting a lot of pressure from the chief executive. They wanted this problem to go away. And so we knew that they wanted this problem to go away. And we knew that we could help them do that because we were outsiders and we had a process and we had an understanding. We knew that there were ways that we could bring their teams together to kind of unlock this problem for them. And so in the conversation with them about kind of understanding, all right, well, how much have you invested in this so far? The question that I provided already, what's the kind of cost of kind of not doing this? What's the cost of getting this wrong? If you kind of do, if this does go well, how will you know it's gone well? What are the success criteria that you're sort of applying to it? Some of those kind of generic questions and some, more specific ones as well, kind of helped us understand what the cost of the problem was. And some of those things were expressed in kind of monetary value, but some of those things were also expressed in sort of personal kind of emotional things too, which is the kind of the kind of worry that they were going to get in a lot of trouble from the chief executive for not being able to deliver on the launch. So we basically were able to kind of establish a sort of relationship with them. We were also able to kind of put a kind of figure to it. And we were able to kind of sort of say to them, look, we will solve this problem for you. We will unblock the system so that you are able to do this launch, and we will do it in the time that that you need it done. And the anchor that we were putting to them essentially was kind of based on the hundreds of millions that they had invested in developing the product. So in the end, we kind of sold them a process which was 3 days of workshop. But the 3 days of workshop was sold for $175,000. And they were sold for that amount because the cost of making the problem go away, as they had sort of articulated to us, was so significant that actually the idea that they could make that problem go away by investing $175,000 felt very, very small in comparison. Now, if we'd gone in saying, no, our 3-day workshop cost $175,000, they would have kind of laughed us out the room and said, there's no way we're going to do that. That's completely ridiculous. But because we had explored it via the lens of what is the problem, how much do they really want it to go away, what's the cost of not making it go away, then our solution is small in comparison to that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, many multiples smaller, Yeah. It sounds,
But the key thing with that is that the lead was not our service, our way of making the problem go away. Like I said, if we come by saying we have a way of making these things go away and they cost $175,000 without establishing really what the value was via their lens, we never would have got anywhere. Whilst the kind of amounts are either relevant or not relevant to this conversation, I think the important thing is if we had led with our assumption about what the right kind of product or service was, and our idea about what the cost of that would be, without establishing the value of that in their minds first, we never would have got anywhere. And so we had the opportunity in that instance, because there was the relationship, because it was being done in discussion, to really, really understand what that was. And then we were able to provide that solution. It was over 3 days, and they happily paid $175,000.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I'm trying to translate that to one-on-one work, but yeah, I mean the example makes a lot of sense. Thank you for sharing that.
I'm curious, when they're buying, are they buying as an individual or are they buying via their company? Because that also again has a big bearing on what somebody is willing and able to pay, of course.
Yeah, sure. No, in this particular product I'm talking about, it's individuals paying for themselves. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the only thing I'd say is that if you are putting these prices on the website, as you say, they are anchoring essentially. And so if the objective is that you're selling it for 15,000, there should be something on the website which is considerably more than that, because otherwise you're anchoring from the price that you want to sell, and then that won't work out for you.
Well, yeah, that's interesting. That 15,000 is kind of the number. We expect very few people to actually take that. That is that's the stretch anchor actually for us.
Right. Okay.
The second tier down from that is around 6,000. So what we expect is that most people are going to take the 6,000. And we have another version that's slightly less as well. So that's how we're trying to do it. But yeah, I mean, it'd be great to figure out what are those questions that can. And I'm not saying we need to do this here. I mean, just maybe it's just an open question to consider. Mm-hmm. Is what are those questions that help an individual? Because there are a lot of people in Happy Startup.
I have a question for you, Dave.
Yeah.
How much is that worth to you?
What?
Answering those questions.
Oh, good question. Yeah, it's so hard to pick a value, but I mean, if it helped me get 5-6 people at a $6,000 price point, I would probably pay I would pay I would pay a few thousand to have that happen, but I'd have to be really sure that would happen.
And that's the process that you're trying to take other people through.
Yeah. So I'm trying to figure out that's a good question you asked me, what's it worth to me to have that? Okay. I mean, so do you think, so is that the question that's going to be not like, what's it worth to you to have a joy in your life?
Not so much the question, but that's the position you want someone to be in, to be able to say, oh, that makes sense. If I can get 36 grand's worth of clients and I spend $3,000 on this, that's a worthwhile investment.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so whether, and this is why I think where Ben was talking to, we can't give you the specifically the question.
Okay.
But we can, and the purpose of this conversation, the course we're doing, is like getting into that mindset of actually what the customer is wanting to be able to easily buy you. And what is it going to make them feel more confident and comfortable to easily pay you that price and buy you at that price?
One of the modules on the course is just exclusively dedicated to this, the questions and how to have these conversations, because in this is where you kind of unlock it. And just one other thing that I would sort of say, if you're putting the 15,000 up as an anchor and you're expecting to sell about 6, it is right, of course, there is a sort of smaller one, because what you're doing there, which to our earlier conversation, you are controlling the comparisons. And that's the kind of goal with the questions, with the conversation, with the dialogue, whether you are going with published prices or whatever, is to control the comparisons. Because the more you control the comparisons, the easier it is for your clients to buy what you do.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I'm just seeing Becky's chat about it's harder when there isn't a monetary ROI, like less tangible outcomes. Yeah, that's the thing. I think it would be really interesting at the Happy Startup School for because there are a lot of coaches, to come to have like a database of those questions. What are the questions that help your client understand the value of, or like come up with an idea of the value of the work for them? That would be amazing.
Huh?
What?
New product idea for us, Ben.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, seriously, coaches would totally pay for that. Absolutely, coaches would pay for that. So you're welcome. I don't even need any. I don't even need any returns or anything. You're welcome. But also, I'm going to go. I don't want to take up too much of this conversation. But Ben, thank you very much. And I'm interested to hear about that meditation business you're doing too. And that might be another counterexample. Is how you're collecting that information in the meditation business you're offering, because that's on a totally different scale and spectrum than the $100 million problem you talked about. So I think a lot of Happy Startup folks would resonate with that too. So I would love to hear about that, but I'll jump off then if that's okay.
No worries.
Sure.
Well, no, thank you very much, Dave. That's really useful to be able to dig into that.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, guys. All right. Don't know how to leave.
You can't. You're in forever.
Now that tested you there, Ben.
It did.
Awesome. Well, I hope that was useful to everyone else who's listening. And if you're listening to the recording, particularly if you are a coach, I'm sure you resonate with the same challenges Dave has. My reflection on this, and even reading recently a book called The Prosperous Coach, is that as a coach, you're always coaching, and whoever you talk to, you're not selling to them. You're trying to help them get the clarity as to what is this worth to me, and getting to that space of that, this makes sense as a decision. Otherwise, you're just basically giving them a box and saying, is this worth this much money for you? And I don't think that's a really hard thing to do as a coach, or, and it isn't, I think a lot of coaches want to do, because what you want is really to work with people you really enjoy working with, rather than just sell stuff to people. Any final reflections, Ben?
No, I mean, I think something that Becky mentioned, that it's harder where there isn't a kind of monetary ROI. I think that's of course true, but equally, and as David sort of saying, like you particularly, Becky, I know from experience, and kind of David too, actually, whilst the coaches in the Happy Start School would really all want this kind of, this list of questions to ask, actually the coaches in Happy Startup community are the ones who have the questions which uncover this. And the thing then is just about how you start to kind of bring those clues back to a thing which you can start to explore kind of numbers against. But actually, the coaches have these bullets. The art, the play then is how you start to kind of frame that with kind of monetary comparisons.
And what springs to mind to me that the value isn't in the questions. The value is in the practice and the confidence to ask the questions and then to use that information to do something with it. And that's about a space, accountability, and some way to just process what's going on. So yeah, it's interesting. Again, I want the thing, but actually it's the outcome that's important, and how do I get there in the most effective way. Cool. Thank you very much, Ben. This was a long one this time round. But I hope it's been super valuable with that specific situation that we're trying to tackle. So until next week, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. And yeah, thanks, Ben. Chat soon.
Thank you.